What's going on? Hello, Steve. How you doing, brother?
Jeremie Kubicek, I'm very, very well. A little bit sore throat, man flu, but nowhere near as bad as you, I hear.
Yeah, well, I'm doing much better. Welcome to the Founders Livestream, by the way, for all of you watching from around the globe. So I got a negative COVID test, and in fact, I had two negatives, but I had to have had it based on everything else all the symptoms. So that was fun. Yeah, getting into a quarantine into our guest house for 10 days. That was for an extrovert. It was actually really, really good and really hard at the same time.
Wow. 10 days on your own in isolation as a connector.
That's it.
Feeling ill and feeling a bit sorry for yourself.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. Jez, I'm
reaching out. No one calling me to talk. No one. Oh, wait. Sorry. I'm trying to make you feel bad.
I did call you when I knew you. Obviously, you decided that a pioneer's bedside manner was not what you needed at that point. So Kelly is the guardian going to military precision for you. But I imagine she followed the rules as well. Did you just leave the food by the door and ring the bell?
Yeah. So total window, I'd grab it and come in, and we played by the rules, and just wanted to make sure no one else got sick in the process. So,
well, it's good to have you back to near full health. So,
absolutely.
Well done.
Yeah. But I did get a chance to contemplate and think a lot. In fact, I treated that 10 days as the end of the year. It was almost like the New Year's, because I had so much time. And so, and it was over the holidays, over Thanksgiving, and, the family's doing stuff and I'm stuck out there. So, but what I did though, is I really went through a deep of like, hey, what was 2020 really like? What has changed?
Wow.
And how do I view the future? And so being December Founders Livestream, thought, hey, let's have that conversation with us and go, how do we view the year, and how do we take this crazy year into perspective?
Wow, that's I'm glad you've used the time well, Jeremy. That's like a level of depth. You usually do your sort of, I'm always deeply in awe of your review of the year, where you analyze every trip and every meeting in a way that would make your average guardian wince with detail. I'm like going, you do it so you've done it on steroids to look at what was the year 2020 and what is coming in the future. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. And I normally my year-end process is I'll go through every meeting and I'll rank them A, B, C. I would actually go through all my trips.
I was always disappointed that my meetings were always a C when you ranked.
Yeah, they were really low. But it doesn't really matter now. So I didn't do the normal year-end stuff because it doesn't matter how much I traveled or I didn't travel. We had a few trips there, the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
I didn't travel. So therefore, it's really almost a new game. And so the question, and this would be a good conversation for us, and for any of you who are listening to maybe just jump in with us and think through it. If you want to ask us questions, feel free to ask questions. If you're watching this later and, maybe stir it up and provoke a few things, but what did the chaos of 2020 provoke in you, Steve Cockram? What did the chaos of 2020 provoke in you, good and bad?
So, very, very good question. I think that what it provoked in me, I think that basically things happened in 2020 which would never have happened at my stage of life without COVID. So I know we did real lockdown over here in England. You just did, you kind of put an extra space between yourself at the restaurant in America. Whereas we had like full lockdown where you weren't allowed anyone near you for months. And I think what it did was it forced a change of pace of life, and it forced a massive reduction in the number of relational interactions, and almost the things that I would use to almost not waste time, but the things that I would do just because I had the opportunity to do them all got stripped back. So I think it was a real it was a real chance to ask what was really important in 2020, and probably ask questions that about what does a mode of being and doing look like, because a lot of the traditional assumptions changed. So it would never have crossed my mind without this year that I could do my work without serious travel. So I've not been anywhere since Cancun. Thank goodness we got Cancun in at the end of beginning of March, end of February, beginning of March. I have been not even near the airport, and I've not been into London. So if you think of the two main staples of my world of work anyway, I've not been into London yet. I only live 20 miles from London, because obviously they terrified us that going on the train was literally a death sentence. And I've not flown anywhere. And yet actually, when I look at the work I'm doing right now, I think the biggest change for me is just the questioning of going, in person will become a premium product, digital will become the norm. And I think that would never have happened. You know, we sometimes say, didn't we, that basically we went 10 years into the digital future in 10 days. So that's my first. I'll come back to another one, but I'm going to ask you the same question of going, what happened in you? So I think I learned things about myself, and I learned things about my mode of engagement and operation, which I thought were probably fixed, that actually turned out to be much less fixed than I thought they would be, working on the paradigm that without any, I had to be on the ground with people to be able to do the level of consulting coaching we do. So that'd be my first one. What about you? What would you say would have been the big, one of the big things? Obviously, you probably got a long list, having spent 10 days on your own thinking about it. So you have a competitive advantage, Jez.
Well, what happened this year was very similar. Our world, stopped. So 60 speaking gigs, which is an average for me each year. So I'd have 60 speaking gigs. All of those gigs get postponed or moved online. So from 60 to about 15 to maybe 20. Maybe I have a few more that are popping up in the next couple of weeks even, but they're all digital. So I've only had one live speaking event.
Wow.
So you think about that, that radically changed my work. And, part of my work was the marketing side of that and using speaking as a platform to introduce Giant into places and so forth. That was gone. And so what happened with me is it made me basically say, okay, that's the reality. Deal with it. Do I want to keep doing that work?
Yeah.
And I actually had to answer that question. And the reality was like, I'm just not sure. I don't think I want to do it like that. So I went from a nationally minded person, a national, then global, then local third, to all of a sudden local being the only thing. And so, local, we're not in lockdown like you are. There's still a lockdown. There's not a lot of meetings. There's no, not a lot of a lot of the meetings are still via Zoom. And so even locally, so it just it changed the way that I saw the immediate future, and it really have changed the way that I saw this world. So whiteboard, just working on my whiteboard completely changed based on what it would be in the time and energy and effort and the strategy. And so it also led to a role shift for me from CEO to executive chairman. And all of that was this conversation around COVID. And it affected identity and, work you do and so forth. So, I mean, it changed our worlds, right? I mean, probably most of you listening, it probably changed your worlds as well, everyone.
I think the other one for me is I don't think I realized how much my focus was, how much travel created challenge for Helen and the girls, let alone Jemima, my dog. So if you think about it, I thought, if you think when we started, Giant 7, 8 years ago now, I reckon on average, I probably travel 10 weeks a year, usually to America. I love America. It feels like my home. But I don't think I realized that actually the impact me being at home has had on family. So actually, I've never been at home this much. And Helen goes, well, the girls have never been happier. Or actually, our home has never been more peaceful. And I'm going, well, I hope it isn't just purely because of that, because I'm going to feel guilty if you think I'm going to stay at home forever. But you know, that might be a nurture guardian blackmail. But I look at it and go, it's given us more time than we've ever had, you know, as a family, and certainly that actually learning that we really do love each other. You know, we've learned how to play cards. I mean, even Charlie is a brilliant little card sharp now at the age of, you know, 9 going on 10, because actually there isn't lots of people coming over, or you're not going out for the evening or whatever it might be. And the other thing, of course, is whereas before I would have filled my evenings with activity of going to the cinema, go to the pub, meet people, the last thing I want to do is another Zoom meeting. So if you think about it, you kind of go, the whole social fabric of engagement changed. But that was a good learning for me. So in Gears language, I probably did more first gear and a lot more second gear than I would naturally do looking at my default tendencies and patterns. So always looking for, it's not that I'm going to live like I do now when the vaccine comes. Hey, by the way, as a 50-year-old, I get I'm further up the queue than I was 6 months ago. So that's another big change in 2020. But this idea of going, actually the attentiveness to second gear for me, it was easier to do when I didn't have the distractions of third gear and fourth gear and the option to travel. So that'd be another personal aha for me of going, I think I've grown in my second gear capacity, not because I'd have chosen to, but because I embraced the opportunity when COVID created it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, like if you're watching this, you're thinking about it. You know, we spend a lot of our time talking about raising up liberators, about becoming a 100x leader, 100% healthy, learning how to multiply. I think it's really important just to be honest with yourself. What has changed? And it just is. You know, I think I had to deal with that over COVID here, and I had to deal with like, you know what? That's never going to change. That's going to be changed forever. This might alter back, but almost then controlling what you can control. And when you look at your current life in current world, to think, what are the things that you can control and what do you want to change? You know, I will also tell you, I don't know how many people I've talked to, and you probably the same way, Steve. They'll say, we'll talk about and we'll whine about 2020. And then they'll say something like, but it's actually been really good.
Yeah.
Well, there's some really good things that have happened because it has been the biggest global reset of our life. And we'll probably hopefully the hardest year of reset.
Yeah. I mean, we're always a little bit, I mean, if you think of the work we had to do to basically deal with the fact that the world changed. I mean, you were always brilliant at going, something's coming. I remember you even in Cancun was saying, guys, we need to be ready. We're going to need to pivot this business. We need a survive and a thrive strategy, or, you know, whatever it was. And actually seeing that, and again, just knowing how many people's work has changed overnight. And in some ways, we're like sitting here the other side of this now. Giant is thriving, it's growing, the team are awesome, and the product just gets better every day. It's almost like, but there were moments, weren't there, in the middle of it where we're like, okay, well, what is going to happen? How do we get through this? You know, and I think that's the other bit that a lot of people tend to, I think we're good at doing reflection and we're good at watching our tendencies. So we always say, make different mistakes than the ones you made last time. You have to be able to look in the mirror and go, how do I know myself so I can lead myself? So how do I make sure that even though this has been a challenging year, that actually my capacity to be a leader worth following, to be a 100x leader, is actually greater next year than it was this year. I think the other one for me is not being able to travel meant I probably took on apprenticeship as a discipline in a way that I probably couldn't have done with the same way if I'd been traveling so much, because actually the only people I could see were the people who could travel to my house. So it was a bit like going, it was a natural excuse to maybe focus more on the, you know, the smaller number of investment than naturally necessarily the, you know, like we said, the speaking stuff we do and the traveling and the training. So that's another focus for me where I go, I think I learned again, or really had to focus on, what did it mean to multiply knowledge, skills, and expertise into the few? Because almost to do it to the masses was removed for a season. So, you know, so much learning, really.
So if you're again, if you're watching this, the question we have for you is leaders define culture. What and how are you going to review and look at 2020? What changed? What needs to change? What are the ramifications of it? And how do you lead in this next season? You know, what are the things that were really good for your family? What are the things that were really good for your team? What are things that are still really hard? You know, I've talked to someone the other day. They're just dying underneath the Zoom. Their team is struggling. They're having just such a, and then I've talked to other teams that are doing way better on Zoom. So it's interesting to see the dynamic. So wherever you are, how do you use this as an opportunity to get better and to grow? So kind of what we would encourage you to think about if you're watching this. Let's jump in. Go ahead, Steve.
No, go.
Let's jump in and talk about 2021. We would like to talk about the future. And we can be a little prognosis. Let's talk about global and like what's going on around the world from our view, and then even what and how do we operate and live in 2021. So what do you think? I mean, you can get into conspiracy theories if you want to, but what do you see as what's happening from a global economic standpoint, and what's going to happen, and when is it going to happen in 2021?
Gosh, I think that the vaccine is a game changer in the sense that most business needs certainty, and that with interest rates at historic lows and effectively new economic norms where it just seems that central banks can print money and nobody seems to really mind, and they'll lend to them in a way that you just go, I wonder at whatever point the markets go, we're not happy that the Bank of England is just printing money. You know, we in theory have spent $394 billion, or pounds even, that's a lot more, on COVID alone. And you look at it and go, well, at some point, someone's going to want us to pay that money back. You know, we obviously over here, but I look at the fact that those who've survived COVID actually, I think, will bounce back relatively quickly. And I think it is probably in that creative destruction type. I think there's an awful lot more people who are actually understanding what the new world skill sets will look like. There's going to be a lot more entrepreneurialism. There's a lot more people who are going, I can't really rely on big business to do what I need to do. So I'm watching a lot of entrepreneurship happen. But I do believe that probably I think there will be, if not a V-shaped recovery, I think the vaccine will actually create a momentum, because there's an awful lot of money needs to find a home, and no one's going to get any money by keeping it in cash right now. So at some point there are going to be new opportunities, and I'm probably more optimistic about the economic bounce back of activity. What I'm not so sure about is what the long-term sustainability of debt looks like. And that may be, you know, to give Justin a shout out, it's interesting that Bitcoin is back at 20,000. So will the world order, you know, or are we going to end up with effectively the money just gets written off? I just don't know how we pay back what we've borrowed. I mean, it's not going to happen out of basic taxation. So, but almost it's like everyone's kicking the can down the road and going, hey, until the recovery is fully embedded, we're just going to keep printing money. We're going to keep borrowing money. And it's almost like the adage is, you know, if you're going to have an overdraft, have a big one. Because if they can call in your overdraft, they probably will. But if calling in your overdraft means they're not going to get anything like their money back, they're often happy to keep lending. So that's I'm slightly more optimistic than I was, because I think the vaccine will trigger potentially an entrepreneurial boom. But I also think you'll see a hedonistic, almost like the Roaring Twenties type model from the last time we had the Spanish flu, because I think there's an awful lot of people that go like, I don't know how much longer I've got left to live. People will sell businesses when they're older. People will go, I want to travel, I want to do X, Y, Z. So I think it will change work. We know that. But I do think we will see a reaction to, I don't know how life is more precarious than I thought. Therefore, do I really want to be working until I'm 85? How do I do it? So I think some of that will just accelerate the trends that are there. That's just me. using my extra intuition and talking out loud. So I don't know what you think about that, or what do you want to add in from American perspective?
I actually agree with you. I think it changed the psyche of the average person. So especially if they're a professional, because it actually affected how we work, when we work, why we work, all of those questions. And for those who are truly responsive people, or people who reflect, then they actually make changes, and they've made changes or are making changes to their life. I mean, in the United States, you see San Francisco being depleted. So everyone leaving to go to Lake Tahoe, or to move to these other places, because like, why are we commuting and doing that work when we now know that our companies said for the next few years we're going to be remote? So therefore, remote work is the new norm, and we've all learned how to do Zoom and technology to such a degree, and we found, you know what, it's adequate. It can actually, it can still work. It can still, so the ramifications of that for cities and city living and what that looks like, that people probably aren't going to be beholden like to the factory, to the company, to such a degree that they might. So I'm saying factory, you know what I mean, not real factory. As far as when I look at the vaccines, it feels like we're on a bridge, and we're on the start of a bridge, and that bridge to the new norm of whatever. But the vaccines are potential. There's a lot of people who watch and listen who may not agree with the vaccines and all this stuff, but the psychology of it is the hope for it. You know, in a lot of cases, like the flu shots oftentimes don't work, or it's a different strain or whatever, but it's the psychology of it that is what I think is what's happening. And I think we're in the front end of it. Obviously you guys are a step ahead. You're launching with Pfizer.
Well, and there's two ways of looking at it, Jez. Either we finally won something, having been utterly useless at responding to COVID as a country, or the rest of the world is waiting for Britain to test the vaccine to see whether it works, and then they'll implement it. So we're either on the cutting edge of new technology, or we're the human guinea pigs to the rest of the world. So depending on your conspiracy theory perspective, then I think that's. But put it this way, I will be front of line for a vaccine. Don't you worry. I want to get us going. They're saying that basically you might not be able to get into sports events. I would say if you want to get the vaccine done for America, just say you can't watch any football live if you haven't got a vaccine pass. I think that would clean it up in a couple of weeks.
That's probably right. Totally. But that bridge is again between now. We've got Christmas to go through, which is going to be another surge. Winter, January, February are going to be more surge. So probably through February. My hunch is probably not until May that it's probably the entire second term or the spring to get through. That May going into the summer is the outlook. I know for America, there's obviously a political change. So the Biden team, and so in that, I think that there's going to be a natural growth that happens with any opening, and so, but I don't think it will be long term unless the policies, let entrepreneurs, free market, and traditionally what is appearing to be is it's going to be a taxation. So they're going to get their money back based on taxes, which then doesn't lead to continued growth. So it'll be interesting for sure. I won't predict that yet.
There's a great question here from Monty down here, which says, neither of you seem fearful at all. I'm struggling with fear of the future. Can you give me any tips to get a hold of this? Well, I think, Monty, that most of us were fearful. I mean, I'll be honest, I was fearful in March when everything stopped. So nobody really knew what the true impact of the pandemic was. I think had governments not done what they did to step in, you effectively could have had everyone stop spending overnight. So a lot of, I just look at the consulting market, it literally stopped overnight. So there was a fear of the unknown. And that's the thing, I think, Monty, which for me is when you don't know what you're dealing with, you are almost, it's really quite difficult to know, well, what are we wrestling with? How long is it going to be? And my observation, Monty, is that COVID impacted different sectors of the economy completely differently. So therefore, it really depended, I think, when the dust settled, which sector were you in and how badly were you impacted by COVID. So if you're in a technology space, if you look at the shares in America and the NASDAQ, if you were in technology, COVID was the best accelerant of your bit. You look at the share jumps in all of the big companies and, Giant and whatever it might be. So we very quickly, I think, Monty, were able to realize we're going to be okay. So that's a selfish Maslow's, everyone went back to, am I going to be able to pay the mortgage? Am I going to put food on the table? And then you begin to move into, okay, so I'm okay now. What's our business response for our employees? And now we're looking at the future as opportunity. But I do think, Monty, it's like our perspective, well, pioneers and connectors are always futurists and optimists. But in some ways, our economic reality hasn't been damaged by COVID. There was a fearful piece, but I do look at it in the sense of we are by nature as entrepreneurs optimistic, because we inherently go, if we can see what the future is going to be, if we know what the landscape is, if we know what the parameters, well, a vaccine's coming, well, that's going to basically mean it might take a while to roll out, but the lead time for most business planning is not 1 month, it's 6 months out. So the moment people begin planning for the future, they begin to see opportunity. And that's Jeremy's point of going, you can't tax your way out of the debt. I mean, we might be able to inflate our way out of it long term, or whatever it might be, but we have to bite the bullet and go, actually, we need to invest further. So for me, I'd invest in infrastructure right now. I mean, I think the time to invest in super fast broadband, you should borrow as much as you possibly can right now when it's virtually at 0% interest, and put it over a long term and effectively invest and create the entrepreneurial piece of the puzzle. So Monty, for me, you probably have to take some responsibility for your own, how am I going to shape my future, fully aware that's easier for us than it may be for you. I don't know your context, but once you know what the future is going to look like, or you've got some more certainty, you usually can begin to plan with a bit more degree of confidence than we were at the beginning of it. I don't know what you would add to that, Jez.
Yeah, no, I think that another thing that I've coached people on is the need versus want difference. So what do you need? What are your actual core, again, Maslow needs? We have a house payment, we have kids schooling, whatever it is, and you go, okay, what do you need to be able to earn, and then how do you deal with that? And I think that's what a lot of people have done in the earlier part of this year, to that degree, to go, okay, I think we're going to be okay, versus want, which is a whole different level. And so I think what's been happening is a lot of wants and a lot of expectations about what they want have been being reset. I just talked to a certain guy who had these plans. He was going to move to a certain location. He lives in California. He was going to X, Y, and Z. He ends up literally losing a girlfriend, deciding not to move where they're going to move, his whole entire world. But when I asked him, are you okay? He goes, oh yeah, my needs are met. I have what I need, but my wants have all changed. And I think that need-want dynamic is where a lot of peace or frustration can occur. And so really understanding what the wants are and maybe resetting your expectations for the future, that's why it's a great opportunity to dream and rethink. Hey, do I want to keep doing this? Should I be in a different role? And that gives you the opportunity to have a vision and dust your vision off, have some dreams, get some plans in place. And, a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah. What else do you think, Joseph, is going to be, what are the big picture changes we're going to see in 2021? I mean, one of the ones that I know I've been reading a lot about is the rise at the top end of artificial intelligence, and that actually that is changing the world. So software is, the software apps are everywhere now. Gosh, you think 10 years ago we didn't, how much of that, but also watching at the front end right now that maybe a decade away, that actually the ability for people, for AI to affect artificial intelligence to effectively be able to think and at times be better than us. So even the chess protocols and all the gaming now that's there, actually they're able to teach it how to do something, and then human beings upgrade it to the point where we will never be as good at it in the future. So there's a little bit of fear and opportunity in that, but I think that's another accelerant that we're seeing as a trend, that the evolution of software as a solution for virtually everything. We talked this week, didn't we, as a team, where software has disrupted industries. I don't think that's going to slow down anytime soon, is it?
No, and if anything, it usually takes 15 to 20 years to get into the new century.
Yeah.
Well, the COVID basically pushed us over the line into the 21st century. When my mom is now ordering groceries online and knows how to do it, and when you have grandparents who are doing Zoom calls and FaceTime now and fully adapting. I had someone recently said, Giant, you guys used to be on the extreme, but now as a technology business, you're right in the middle. You're a 21st century investment strategy. So technology now has moved from the edge to the middle. And that's, it is anything related to technology is going to be where it's at. And all COVID did was exacerbate that.
It was interesting. I was talking with our first ever client, just that you won for us when, when would that have been? 2013 with Darwin, who since have gone from, I think, 700 employees to 8,000 and an IPO. So we obviously did something right along the way. And it's very interesting asking them now. They're saying one of their big things about the future of work is everything will rise or fall on, in many ways, the skills of leaders to be able to lead teams in a dispersed world. And actually, they won't have the same leaders. So the skill sets for team leaders are going to have to increase, because you're not going to be sitting in a cubicle opposite all the people who are working with you. But when we looked at the, building a plan for, how do we work from where we are now to where they want to be, the one non-negotiable was there had to be a technological platform solution to create scale, because everybody had to have access. It was almost like, we'll do this with the kind of the senior leaders, we'll do this with everyone, and then we'll build in the gaps. So if you think of that solution model now, is people assume that any form of solution is going to have a component of technology and a component of a platform as a non-negotiable. I mean, what you remember we said, hey guys, we're going to use an app and a platform to help support the work we're doing. It was like, okay, why are we doing that? Well, no one's ever going to use that. Where now, in the conversations, it's now assumed that will have to be part of the solution that is available. So it's incredible how fast things are actually moving at the moment.
Absolutely. And I think that's the part for, if you're a leader, have responsibility over any team or an organization, there is opportunity there. There is opportunity for growth, but you have to think differently. And this year is basically a forced slowdown and a forced relearning and rethinking and resetting of your business, of your team, of your organization. And we'll come out of it better. A lot of people will, or a lot of people won't make it. There'll be a lot of companies, a lot of teams that won't make it. And basically COVID, their inefficiency, or they forced the issue, and those who did make it will come out stronger. So not much fun in the process, but
I put it this way, I would say to kids who are going through high school at the moment are going, if you can code in the new world, you'll never be out of work.
Right.
So thinking about, how do we always say the last institutions to change are things like education, church, they're almost like the back end of. But if you look at how we skill kids, young people, with the skills of the new world, I do think that in some ways that's another area that we're going to see increasing evolution, because, they can't get enough developers right now. But there's not a lot of, there's certain old-fashioned traditional skills which are going to be less and less. The low-level white-collar skills will be heavily challenged, I think, by the software and the kind of the AI manipulation of data. But we could talk forever, Joe, I know. So,
and the last thing, so if you're listening, you don't think we're just Pollyanna only. We know there's unbelievable ramifications There's mental health challenges. I wonder about the long-term ramifications of education and like, how is this helping our workforce? I'm not sure it is. I'm sure we're depleting or losing some things potentially. Now there's some opportunity to rebuild and opportunity for education to look different, and it needs to. But definitely there's ramifications around education, around obviously certain people's health. And we recognize that. We're just talking out loud to go, look, we're letting you into the way that we've been thinking about 2020 and what we're seeing for 2021. And our hope is, in the midst of it, that you would actually be at a point where maybe there's some significant change in you that's positive, so that you've taken the negative and allowed the negative to maybe, some of the rough edges to go away, or some relationships to get stronger, and make the most of it in the midst of difficulties. So any last thoughts for you, Steve, before we leave?
No, I think, what you said there was spot on. I think that it's very easy to be a victim of change. So historically, whenever there's been a technological change as the one we've just accelerated through, you either fear it and resist it, or you embrace it and go with it. And the reality is you're going to have to embrace it and go with it. Whatever age you are, the world is not going back to what it was. And COVID has literally accelerated that transition. So it feels disorientating, but you're going to have to embrace the new world and the digital world and the technology world that we now live in, rather than getting frustrated with it. What does it mean to be part of it rather than a victim of it? And that's the mentality, I think. Where's the opportunity, rather than, oh my goodness, why isn't it like it used to be? Because I do think there are opportunities. And I think that actually, as Jeremy said, there's chances for us to have grown as people this year, because the things we thought were essential aren't. And the things that actually, perhaps when we slow down and look in the mirror, there are things about ourselves and the way we engage with others that there is opportunity for us to grow as people and as leaders through this. So that's our hope anyway. So that'd be my final thought anyway. And you've got a great little link there if you want to restart your team for 2021.
That's right. So if you are interested in Giant and you go, you know what, I really like you guys and what you're about, find out what we really do. Go to giant.tv/bootcamp and use this season to get ready for 2021. The bootcamp gives you a chance to really dive into your team, find out the different personalities, how people are wired, how they think, what's different, what's your nemesis voice, how to communicate more effectively. It's a great resource, and would love to serve you and show you what we can do. All right, my friend. Thanks, Steve. Good to see you, my friend. And again, it's December. 2020 is almost finished. 2021's almost upon us. So for all of you, we wish you the best. Thanks.
Good to see you well, my friend. Good to see you well.
Cheers. Bye-bye.